And hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And thank you very much for joining us tonight for a special interview with Adam W. Finnegan, the author of the book, The Sleeper Agent, a very explosive new book that just published this past December. The Rise of Lyme Disease, Chronic Illness, and the Great Imitator Antigens of Biological Warfare. Guys, this book just blows me away. All I can say is this is like the holy grail of understanding biowarfare, and I'm just delighted to be sharing it with you. I want everyone to know that Adam has graciously allowed me to read it on the show. I always have to stop and make my comments too. It's not a professional book reading, but I'm just wanting to get this out to everybody as fast as I can. So I've devoted this week to reading the book, and now tonight, our second chance to have a conversation with the author, Adam Finnegan. Before I introduce Adam again, I'm going to read a little, just the last bit of the foreword, which is written by none other than John Loftus, the great whistleblower and author that many of us are familiar with already. And after spending about 6 pages giving a very generous account of his struggles to get the word out against all kinds of obstacles, he not only began the foreword by saying he's honored that Adam Finnegan asked him to write this introduction to his brilliantly researched history of the stealth weapons of biological warfare and their relation to Lyme disease. All the credit for this goes to Adam Finnegan. Then at the end, America, it is indeed terrifying to embrace Adam's conclusions. But we must deal with our fears by recognizing the facts. Adam's conclusions follow a pattern of Russian scientific research in stealthy biowarfare experiments. America owes Adam a debt of great gratitude for forcing us to ask ourselves fact-based questions about what is responsible for the decline of Americans' health when compared to other modern countries. He has devoted years of his life without remuneration in the hope of helping others. I hope that he receives some type of grant or funding to continue his remarkable work. Years from now, I would not be surprised if he is the first non-physician to be nominated for the Nobel Prize in Medicine. John Loftus, 2023. Well, you're not a doctor, but man, you have put the narrative together in a way that I can't wait. I absolutely can't wait for somebody to try to take it on. To try to get past this narrative. Well, okay, fantastic work, and I say that not even having finished quite halfway through the book. As I say, I'm a slow reader, but I'm taking the time to share the book as I go along, and very often stop and look at the footnotes and the endnotes and cross-check things. It's a wonderful way to spend my week, and probably be the next couple of weeks as well, because there's so much stuff in it.
Oh yeah.
Well, Adam, the hard part about it really is to get people to even just to, as you say, embrace the facts. But the facts are horrifying. But the facts are there, and as our founding father John Adams once said, facts are stubborn things. So let's deal with them. Thank you for joining me, and how are you tonight, Adam?
Great. Thanks for having me on again. Once again, I was on last week, and that was a great interview, and happy to be on again.
Well, let's. You wisely began your book with a kind of an introduction of, I think it's five principles that you have to kind of understand in order to wrap your arms around this subject of strategic biowarfare, the idea of actually intentionally using biological weapons, germs, ticks, whatever, to attack a nation, not for a immediate battlefield victory, no, but to destroy the ability of the nation to function through debilitating diseases, through deaths, through tying other people down with dealing with their relatives and friends. And all of these things are now contributing. We have a lowered standard of lowered life expectancy. We have incredible amounts of cancer. It's the diseases that are multiplying are horrifying, and a lot of them seem to be related to the story that you put together. So how are these, how would you approach just the general public? Because a lot of folks are going to be hearing your story for the first time. Say, here are the principles that you need to bear in mind.
Yeah, that was the five angles of biological warfare, and it's kind of like the idea is not to kill, but to keep people alive and worn out so that it runs down the economy and overwhelms the public health system. I ended up having Lyme disease, and I may have had it my whole life, but I know my mother had it from 2000 to 2009. She was really sick. And then in 2016, I realized I had it. But the regular CDC test didn't tell me that. That came back negative. I had to go through a different doctor and get one of the old IGX tests, which is different. It's a different kind of test, but it tells you if you have it. And mine came back positive for that. So that was kind of how I got involved with it. And I had read Lab 257, the book that most people are familiar with. And I always thought this character Traub was very mysterious. And I just remember saying, I want to look more into this guy. And then when I got Lyme disease many years later, I kept thinking back to that book. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go into this. Started making this timeline, which is still available. It was on an old site called Operation OpenScript. And I had sent the timeline, but it doesn't really have much of the stuff that's in my book because that came much later. It has to do with some of the other things, like in the United States. And so I ended up sending that to John Loftus. And eventually I heard back from him, and he thought it was a brilliant timeline. And he then introduced me to some filmmakers who were also working on a project about the same stuff. And I ended up writing the book and acting as an advisor to them on the entire story.
As I understand it, the way that you are analyzing the immune system, the immune system is key. And of course that we all are concerned about our immune systems. We talk about immunodeficiency diseases and your own immune system attacking you, and all kinds of things that we hear about, people talking about ever since the most recent pandemic. But the idea that the suppression of the immune system is the key to causing these diseases to become active seems to be hard to grasp. And I don't think any physicians or doctors think that way. You know, we think of, oh, somebody's got a virus, or this is a worse virus than that one, or the virus has been gain of functioned or weaponized or whatever, so it's gotten worse and worse and worse, but it's a bad virus. But that's not the immune system. The immune system is what's attacked with these strategic bioweapons, as you explain.
Yep, and now I point out that there are two spectrums of disease. There's the acute disease, which has a heavy immune response, and you see all of, you see your body, it gets all puffed up and red, and basically it seems like what that is just trying to keep it out of your central nervous system and into your organs. It's trying to, create a barrier so that it can't get through there. But in these kinds of diseases, the polar opposite happens, and the immune system is suppressed to such a degree that it's not able to fight back, and it then allows a central nervous system invasion and invasion of the organs and all of that stuff, and the lymph nodes. And so I think there's a reason why the immune system tries to keep stuff out of the central nervous system and the inner core of your being. And so when the floodgates are down and there's nothing there, that's where I talk about this phrase immune tolerance, being that the immune system is so suppressed it's forced to tolerate conditions that otherwise shouldn't.
So when you say immune tolerance, what you're saying is that the immune system is no longer reacting; it's tolerating the pathogen.
Yeah, but I would say that it's only tolerating it because it's being actively suppressed, and not just the absence of an immune response, but it's being, bombarded with antigen, and it's actively being suppressed into that state of tolerance.
Well, again, I'm not a doctor or a scientist, and I'm learning all these terms, and I think everybody else is too. But I think we're tough, and we're able to do this work because, again, it is these are facts. The facts are facts, and well, another aspect of biowarfare is that it is a very dirty business. Is your other angle, or one of your other 5 angles? Talk about it being a dirty business.
Yeah, and so I like to refer back to Germany in World War I, how they were caught using chemical weapons and they were caught using biological weapons in that germ sabotage program, and they ended up having to pay reparations for that. That took them 92 years to finish paying off that debt. They finished paying it off in like 2012 or something like that, for stuff that happened in World War I. But then it also caused what was called the Treaty of Versailles, and that restricted Germany from having a military at all,
right?
Or in building one up. And so that's basically what paved the way for the Third Reich, is that these conditions where Hitler took control of Germany and he kind of flipped off the League of Nations and said, "We're not doing this." And they actually collaborated with the Soviet Union. They went to the Soviet Union to build up their army, and so they were in collaboration for a while, even though they became bitter enemies. But it became a very dirty business. Nobody wanted to get caught in another scandal like Germany had in World War I. Nobody wanted to be caught red-handed using this stuff. And in the global community, it was just seen as something very disdainful and not acceptable.
But on the other hand, the facts are consistent with logic. I mean, I want to talk about horses for a minute. I think we've recognized that glanders was probably used as a weapon even into into 18th century. If I recall, something about the British and the battles in the Netherlands or the Low Countries in that time. And so there was a knowledge of glanders and how it could weaken an army by weakening the horses. Now, war is war. Like General Sherman said in the Civil War, war is hell. Mm-hmm. You don't expect any you don't expect to get a break in hell, you know. In hell, you know, it's bad. And if you think that they're not going to do something, well, remember what General Sherman said: war is hell. And you know, Shakespeare says it's all over, you know, older literature. We've been seduced into something that's just kind of almost unbelievable, and that, you know, we can conduct these wars. Like the war can happen in Ukraine, the war can happen in the Middle East or in China or wherever. It hardly affects us or the Western Europeans or most of the more wealthy places. And you know, we don't recognize what war is in the United States, not having been invaded since 1813, I think. We're not used to that kind of thing. But man, you know, for instance, I've just been reading the Belarus Secret by John Loftus. I got the original 1982 version, and you want to know what war is really like? Read this. It's worse than hell. The things that they did. So, and that's part of this story too, because those people come over here in Operation Paperclip. So many things I want to talk to you about. But the horses, yeah, sure, of course, Germany's going to attack the enemy's horses, and Britain's going to attack the enemy's horses. But what you found out and pointed out is that there's a whole sophisticated spy network going on, in which Britain was infecting American horses under cover of being German agents, so that America would think that the Germans did it and get antagonized against Germany, you know, in the years leading up to World War I, which was Britain's goal, which was to get America to go and fight Germany for them. Oh, the intrigue, but it's quite predictable when you think about how important horses were in World War I. And if you could developate the other guy's horses, he couldn't move his cannons around. As simple as that.
And there was another thing that I pointed out too, is that the horses were being used to produce serums and vaccines. So indirectly, it became a human target, because horse serum is often used to produce a lot of the agar that is used to grow, like meningococci, and it's also used to produce the serum itself. And we have a guy who was over at the Rockefeller Institute jabbing these horses used by the Rockefeller Institute. And then I talked about the meningococci, experimental meningococci vaccine program in Kansas, and how that was ground zero for the Spanish or the 1918 influenza. And like a month after that program finishes up is when we see it start. And I made the case that at the very least it would greatly enhance it.
And let's break that down for folks, because you know there's been so much written about the 1918 flu, and people are still going back. And you know there's claims that somebody found some of the actual virus and can, you know, God forbid, reanimate it. So there's so much about it, but again, you have picked through the evidence and you have written a narrative about it that I don't think anybody else has done. So tell us just briefly, in brief form, what your research has shown with regard to the so-called Spanish flu of 1918. Where did it come from?
So I pointed out John Loftus, according to his sources, the Russians thought that the British developed it from an avian virus. That was the real source of it. And I had been looking into Britain that whole time. They were on my radar, you know, in this whole situation. And so what do we know? We know that they infiltrated that germ sabotage campaign that Germany had going on, made it a lot more costly. And then I'm thinking they may have been involved in this contaminating of the horses and their tissues that would be used to make that meningococci vaccine that was given to soldiers at Camp Funston down in Kansas in 1917. And we have people, this very suspicious guy, Eric von Steinmetz, who appears to have been possibly a British double agent. He doesn't look like he was a German agent, and actually one of the German agents punched him in the face, knocks him down, and throws his battered suitcase at him full of germs and tells him to get out because he was just a really shady character, and they didn't trust him. And I'm thinking he was probably a British double agent and sent in to penetrate the operation further. But he was down at the Rockefeller Institute in that, I think in New Jersey or New York, and he was jabbing the horses, but he didn't see any noticeable disease playing out. And he boldly goes into the Rockefeller Institute after he does this and asks them to take a look at his cultures because he thought that he wanted to know if they were dead or not. And they told him they were inactive. And I'm thinking this is the form of glanders that is they called it the Vietnamese time bomb because it could remain latent or inactive for a long time before suddenly coming online. And this would be useful if you're going to infect these horses because you don't want them to look diseased. You want this whole vaccine to be put together, contaminated with this stuff, and then much later, after it's already injected into all the soldiers, then it starts coming online, like the Vietnamese time bomb, like it's called. And this form of glanders was called melioidosis. And I have it being found in the British-controlled areas of Burma in the early 1900s. And so I think they were developing that. But then on top of that, what I have is all of this British research being conducted on bacterial viral synergies, where a virus comes through and just kind of devastates your immune system and then activates these secondary infections of bacterial pneumonia and meningococcus and kind of delivers a death blow. And that's what happens in these cases of the 1918 influenza where they turn blue and things like that. A lot of them died not from the virus, but from the bacterial pneumonia that was activated afterwards. And that's
this could have started, and you've laid it out pretty clearly that the timeline and his travels and his suspicious nature of the man that is carrying this glanders that can be infectious to humans goes into the horses at the Rockefeller Institute. These are the horses that are going to be used for the serum in which to bake or cook the vaccine, however you produce it, forgive me. And then that vaccine is going into the soldiers' arms. And this happens a month before they ship out. Have I got that right?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And so, the horse serum in this case was used to produce the agar that they grow the meningococci on.
And this is a vaccine against what?
Meningococcus was.
What is the danger of that? Of meningococcus?
It's like a cause of meningitis, which caused by meningococcus. It's kind of like it's a cocky bacteria, kind of like these small clusters of grapes. They're called cocky bacteria, and they cause meningitis. Or there were rising cases of meningitis, so they initiated this vaccine program. But that's the kind of thing that is very troublesome to try and vaccinate against. It's got that great imitator antigen, which can cause that immune tolerance, or Traub like to call it immune paralysis as well. And I think that might be a more apt term, but it's one of those. It's got those antigens that are very problematic, and when you try inoculating people against it, you have all sorts of problems. Like there were all sorts of nasty reactions. A lot of them couldn't finish the course of shots, so there'd be like 4 shots that they had to take over a certain number of weeks. A lot of them couldn't get past the second, or a lot of them couldn't get to the 3rd shot, and even less to the 4th. And so after they wrapped that up, a month after, I think it was in March, all of a sudden at the same base, this new influenza, this new disease is spreading amongst amongst soldiers at Camp Funston, and they all start shipping out. And of course, they bring it over with them. And during that time, I say in the chapter is that during that time, if the virus didn't actually originate from that vaccine material, I said it would at least greatly enhance it, allow for rapid mutation, because when your immune system is being suppressed so badly, it gives these viruses like an opportunity to just rapidly mutate themselves. So when you have people that are packed in a ship like that, after getting a lot of those shots and whatnot, and then it's like a breeding ground. So when they got over to Europe, it was like dynamite. And so Soviet intelligence thought that this was a British biological weapon. And this was kind of like the big event that kind of kicked on this biological warfare arms race. And it's what made Russia go so heavy into it. They pretty much just focused all they had into that area because they didn't have much money and they didn't have very good technology. But these are things that you could grow in these homegrown labs that were very conservative and utilized some clever methodologies. And they were also ravaged by the typhus epidemic. And it was said that Germany also sent typhus into Russia as well through prisoners of war. So they got hit really hard in the time around the 1918 influenza, all the way into the early 1920s with the typhus epidemics. And they got a good look at the 2 kinds of biological weapons, those that kill and those that incapacitate. So, yeah, and I did lay out the evidence that there's considerable evidence to speak to British having developed this as a weapon.
And your chapter on the Red Pestilence, the Soviet biological weapons program, is a real eye-opener. Americans tend to poo-poo or discount the idea of the Soviets having a serious biowarfare program, but I think that that's very suspicious, especially given a lot of, well, of course, we know that the CIA already knows everything, right? They've got ears everywhere, and of course they know what's going on, but they're going to pretend or act as if it's not important. And I want to talk about why that might be as I introduce a paragraph here or two from the defector, the so-called defector Ken Alibek. And Ken Alibek is still in the news, so he's very relevant to a number of investigations going on right now. But here's to pick up in the middle of it. Alibek made another admission in his memoir about the neurotropic angles and their desire to engineer biological agents to target the mental health and well-being of the victims. I eventually developed psychotropic agents to induce altered mood and behavior in humans. Scientists work with a number of biochemical substances, including regulatory peptides, establishing a shadowy link with our bonfire program, another institute controlled by the 3rd Directorate, which I won't try to name, gathered statistics related to biological research around the world, pharmacological institute, well, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to get down to the bottom, though. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Alibek made his escape to the United States in the middle of the night while coordinating with American intelligence. He was brought to America, where he underwent weeks of interrogation and debriefing. From that point on, he would consult with the Americans on the Soviet biological weapons program, become a professor lecturing on bioterrorism and biowarfare, as well as a co-founder of a biotechnology company with a former bioweaponeer from Fort Detrick. Boy, we've run into that before. However, it seemed the American intelligence was not overly concerned with or believing Alibek's assessment on the level of advancement of the Soviets. He warned them of how advanced and serious their program became, but Western intelligence didn't listen. Now here's the key that I wanted to jump off from. The tripartite blackmail.
Mm-hmm.
USA, Britain, Russia. I think this is the answer to why everything is going to hell right now. It's because of this tripartite blackmail that you describe. In Alibek's memoir, there is a revealing section in particular that shows that following Pasechnik's defection, he was a defector a little bit before Alibek.
Yeah.
After he told the British and Americans about the Soviets' massive biological program, both Britain and the United States kept it secret and decided not to tell the world about it. The West said they would keep it in secret in return for allowing them to travel to Russia and do an inspection of any group of selected facilities they wished to see. The Soviets drew up an off-the-record agreement to be signed, and the agreement was enacted. Alibek was told that they decided to cover for the Soviet Union because it was thought that a public quarrel would endanger progress in other areas of arms control and perhaps even weaken good old Mikhail Gorbachev. This is a vague statement, but I'll present a more likely possibility. If the British and Americans threw the Soviet Union under the bus to the rest of the world and decried the Soviet Union's large-scale bioweapons program, there would be a response from the Soviet Union. Events from the past would be brought out and exposed, like the reckless activities of the British and Americans, for example, the activities of German scientist Erich Traub, and the open-air tests over populated areas with dubious germs that cause fatalities and illness in those exposed, which we will cover in later chapters. More information about the use of germ weapons in the Korean War might materialize. And this is where I think we can look to people like Alan Dulles and the late Henry Kissinger. And of course, all sorts of other dirty secrets on the Americans and the British could be exposed, since the Cambridge Five spies like Kim Philby and Donald McLean had some of their most intimate secrets and gave them to the Soviet Union in the 50s. This could get very ugly, you say, and it really does. I mean, this is only page 62 of the book, but this is what I'm thinking, that this tripartite blackmail is active, and that the reason that we can't say, for instance, I'd like to know what's going on in Odessa in Ukraine. A lot of people suspect there's bioweapons there, or chemical arms factories, or Novichok, or you name it, all kinds of dark stuff. But nobody actually goes there. I mean, in this Ukraine conflict, the United States started off, they've got bioweapons. Victoria Nuland is lying, and all the people against Biden are saying, well, yeah, it's pretty obvious that the CIA is running these bioweapons labs in Ukraine and in Georgia and other places. But the CIA says, no, it's not us, it's not us. That doesn't mean it's not happening,
No, yeah.
And so if perhaps everybody knows that the Russians are running these labs, but the Russians won't admit it.
Mm-hmm.
We won't bust them because we don't want to get busted. And this is where I get to my question for you is it possible that all this stuff is now coming out, through John Loftus and yourself? The timing just seems to be that you're able to publish this after the death of Henry Kissinger. I don't know if you thought about that before or not, But
No.
if John Loftus is under all kinds of national security agreements and, do not disclose this or else
Yeah.
doesn't want to end up Arkansided. Uh, but now maybe, it's time to take that risk and put the stuff out here, because we need to know this. We need to get everybody to understand that the strategic biowarfare is real. And not only is it real, but you say that how did you put it? That it was initiated, after World War II, like in 1945.
Yeah, the war really got rolling. I mean, the Spanish influenza was the event that kind of kicked off the race, but then it really got rolling after World War II. And I made a video specifically about this tripartite blackmail, and I basically laid it out saying, look, this is an ongoing war, because at the moment that we said, okay, we'll turn our heads to any of your bioweapons violations, we'll turn our heads. That means basically you can just keep attacking us and we won't do anything about it. And they will also, in turn, cover for us, supposedly. And, Alibek talked about how they never really kept their end of the bargain. They just kind of, fooled the Americans. And this ongoing tripartite blackmail is basically like treason from within, basically saying you can keep attacking us and we won't do anything, and we're going to turn our heads. And I made the analogy of like two people who want to fight each other, and they're in a public area and they start fighting, and someone calls the cops, right? Cops come and they stop fighting and they pretend to be friends just to make the cop go away so they can keep fighting. And they say, all right, let's take this somewhere where nobody can see us. It's like these countries want to continue this senseless war at the expense of civilians. And this tripartite blackmail has ensured that it can go on unrestricted for the foreseeable future. And it's shameful. But that's pretty much that blackmail is a big deal. I don't think a lot of people understand just how big of a deal it really is, because it's that major turning point that emboldened the biowarfare programs of all nations involved.
When Americans said we're not going to protect our citizens, it's got to be treason. I don't know another word for it.
Yeah, and it was the Bush administration at the time. I wish I could see who actually signed those agreements, but we don't have that information. That they kept it secret amongst themselves, and that was a big deal. It was definitely treason from within,
and beyond that, you've got your state actors, but then you've also got your mafia guys, especially in Ukraine, where you have people that control Murder Incorporated, that they can, just blackmail anybody. They can, and they go after your family. They will. You cannot defeat this mafia if the governments won't stand up to the mafias, if they won't even stand up for their own people. So this is the core, I think, of the sickness, is that you have a person like Joe Biden, the president of the United States, but he's entangled in all this stuff, and he's easily blackmailed. Anybody in a position of power in a major nation is going to know about this problem and be in such a position that they cannot do anything about it. the only people that are going to be able to do anything about it is the grassroots population of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're the ones that are getting our immune systems destroyed. We're
And
the
they're
ones.
also, in the biodefense, is also using this as an opportunity to push endless inoculations on us that are burning out the immune system in the exact same manner as things like Eric Traub's weaponized ticks. It's burning out the immune system in the exact same manner, but they're profiting like crazy, being able to push, this bioterrorism. I mean, and it really is happening, but this is not the solution. And they're just making tons of money off it, harming people even more because you only have one immune system. It's not indestructible. It can't handle endless inoculations and all the stuff that they're putting in the environment. And I believe when you look at like things like that simulant program with the simulation tests, it looks like these so-called germs that they're spraying are not being sprayed out there so much to see how it spreads out, but it looks like they're doing it constantly because it's become this like clandestine aerogenic vaccine program. That's what it looks like, as much as I hate to say it.
Aerogenic, what does that mean?
Like, so it'd be something that would be sprayed into the environment from planes.
Aerosol.
Yeah.
That's what we've been working on. Of course, we have the Frank Olson story and so many others, and in more recent incidents, which in context with the current pandemic, whatever we want to call it,
yeah,
is there's a number of reporters like George Webb are reporting spray incidents where a nursing home would get their HVAC system infected or something, and these are they're running tests or they're trying out their techniques. But this is part of an ongoing biological war of a strategic nature. They're not trying to kill us all at once with an immediate bug that we'd all recognize as, we've all got hit by sarin or taboon or something.
Yeah.
So we're not aware of it. It's eating away at all of us. The statistics are showing the incredible increase in cancers and other things. The tripartite blackmail just reminds me of a card game we used to play as kids. We used to play cribbage. Cribbage was not cribbage. Canasta. Canasta is a game where you could have a partnership like bridge. Two people on one team and two people on another, and you play, and some strategy, some luck. It was a fun game. Spend an evening with family, and we did that with our grandparents and all. But sometimes you would only have three people, and then you would try to play canasta with three people, and it was called cutthroat canasta, because you're always going to have to cut somebody's going to have to stab somebody in the back. Because with three, it's just an uneven game. And so the person you're counting on not to give that card to the other guy, at some point, they're either going to do it or you're going to do something that kills them first. And everybody goes away mad. Nobody's happy at the end of cutthroat canasta.
Yeah.
So that kind of a setup where it just keeps going around and people get madder and madder and madder. It's not fun, but you escalate,
Yeah.
that burns into some dark part of humanity that we seem to be susceptible to. But I wanted to ask a broader question, and that is, I talk to people that talk about overpopulation, and forget about war, forget about, this is biological war. What if it's just like the financial system has decided, well, we just can't manage, unsustainable, too many people. So the way I think of it, that these countries now are all kind of just working within a broader system, and that broader system, the umbrella over top of all of them, may well be looking down at these three card players, being next to each other, thinking this is exactly what we want. This takes care of our population problem for us. Have you thought about it in those terms of that there's an overriding desire to reduce the population, and this is just a convenient thing that they've fallen into.
Well, you will find it interesting that in the last chapter of the book, when you get there, Jonas Salk, the one who wrote that book, Survival of the Wisest, I talked about him addressing this overpopulation thing, saying how medical and scientific advances that keep life going for people, in other words, life-saving treatments, is a threat to the planet because of overpopulation. That's exactly what he said.
Whoa.
That's exactly what he said. I mean, he said it in as vague terminology as possible, but that's when you get down to it, that's exactly what he said. He's saying these life-saving treatments and technologies and science that keep life going for people is a threat to the planet because of overpopulation.
And he probably believed that because he grew up in a Rockefeller Educational Institute where they taught that, that crap, has been taught.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so awful to think that somehow we limit our own population. Yeah.
And he talked about the ability to use RNA viruses in an advantageous way, but also in a disadvantageous way, so that it causes, so that it degenerates the bloodline, so that it destroys the genes, so that it basically phases people out. And then when you look at, so he and Albert Sabin being the one who invented the oral polio vaccine, they both coordinated with MP Chumakov, the top Stalinist bioweaponeer for the Soviet Union. He was the one who was involved in testing out those tick and insect weapons on the Muslims and Mongolians, killing off around 2 to 3 million people. He teamed up with Albert Sabin, and he also worked to some extent with Jonas Salk on these polio vaccines. And then what do we find in those vaccines is that SV40 virus and all sorts of other viruses that act exactly in the manner that Salk is talking about. Call it a coincidence if you will, but at the same time, I have MP Chumakov meeting with Eric Traub in 1947 on Insel Reams to discuss that choriomeningitis virus, or LCM virus, the virus that SV40 acts exactly like and is carcinogenic or oncogenic, cancer-causing. So I find it very, and I lay it out in the last chapter. When you get there, you'll be astonished. And the most crazy part is that right now that guy's son, Konstantin Chumakov, is running vaccine safety at the FDA. So it's like, I say,
how in the heck does that happen?
It's crazy. And I say, even if Konstantin Chumakov meant well, that position is too sensitive to put somebody with that kind of background in a position like that. His father was like Stalin's top bioweaponeer. It doesn't get any worse than that, It's crazy.
And people are just willing to not believe this stuff just because it's so hard to accept.
Yeah, and I do think they probably have these plans to cause these, to curb overpopulation, so to speak. And these are the methods that seem to be employed. But yeah, I included that quote from Salk, and I do think that's a very, very likely possibility.
Well, I sit here tonight with you, having taken the Sabin oral polio vaccine as a young kid when it was offered or forced on us. Really, we didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I remember my parents didn't want to do it, but then they just caved at the end because you couldn't go to school. And
Mm-hmm.
so my sister and I both took it, and
Yep.
damn if I don't have the cancer now. So I would like to know if there's a genetic test where I can see if I have the SV40 virus in me or not. I've had a genetic screening done. I've got a bunch of numbers, whatever they mean, but I need to find a genetic specialist. But I don't know if anybody has. Have you run across anybody saying we can spot whether you've got SV40 in your genetic or blood or
I've never come across that kind of test, but what they said was that about half the U.S. population took that contaminated one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big number.
Yeah.
And it's like a catastrophic number. But and they were having congressional hearings about it, calling it a tragedy, how to prevent another SV40 tragedy. And I also would make the case that even poliovirus itself, that is supposed to be avirulent, or non-pathogenic, the one in the Sabin vaccine, when you make something like this apathogenic, when you burn something out so that it's not pathogenic much, or it's avirulent, as they say, what ends up happening is oftentimes is it becomes able to persist in the body for much longer and actually may cause a very slow disease that's not noticed over many years, much like the LCM virus can do this. So there's that question too, of whether or not it's the actual polio virus that was in that vaccine could also establish these lifelong infections. And what do they do to the body? But definitely the SV40. And then there was another virus called the JC virus, or the John Cunningham virus, which is a lot like SV40. They're polyoma viruses. And then you have the entire HIV thing, which I also covered in the last chapter. A lot of this seemed to trace back directly to all that stuff that was going on at Insel Reims, Eric Chaub's German bioweapons lab. That was the cutting edge facility for the entire world. And so when the Soviet Union captured and acquired that entire laboratory with all of Eric Chaub's best work, they took the lead in biological warfare. At that point, they took the lead. And they got the best of Unit 731, which was the Japanese program. So they got the best of the best in the Japanese, and they got the best of the best in the Germans.
And most people don't know that either. I mean, we are under the impression that we got the best. We got the 731, Douglas Arthur, and Willoughby and them got that, and then the German stuff. Of course, we sent down our Operation Alsace, and we scooped up everybody that we could. But we did. When you look closely, it is apparent that the Soviets were there first.
Mm-hmm.
I read the book of the Paperclip Conspiracy by Tom Bauer, which I read on my show last month. That makes it pretty clear that the Soviets got there first, and as you've absolutely shown that in your book.
I thought that the whole Soviet thing was far-fetched at first when Loftus was telling me about it, but then I was like, well, I won't be so hard-headed, and I'll give it a chance. And I started looking into it, and then it hasn't stopped producing since. And then I basically unraveled the entire story like that. And it was like, we're so focused on our program, we're not looking at any other programs. And this program was massive. And when they acquired all of Eric Chaub's work, that entire laboratory and the best of Unit 731, that was a major, major advantage, because Eric Chaub's work was like the best of the best. And all of his German work, it was on like an entirely different level of intelligence, even though it was evil. And he was just running circles around all of the others. I mean, all of the American scientists, they were not on his level. And all of those Germans at his lab, they were like very, very intelligent people. And they had a lot of original ideas in virology. And so then the Soviet Union took the lead, and because everybody thought that the Soviet Union were just what they call Lysenkoists, they believed in the science of Lysenko. They knew that it failed them, but there were some aspects of it that were actually correct, but they kind of used that to hide their bioweapons program because nobody took them serious under that Lysenko banner. Trofim Lysenko is the agricultural biologist who kind of promoted this idea that traits acquired in the lifetime pass down through your genes. In some ways, that is true. When we're talking about things like LCM virus, that is something you can acquire in one life and pass it down generations. So there are some things that do act that way. But he was kind of like looking at it in the higher life forms. They basically hid their entire biological warfare program under this Lysenko banner, and it was never taken serious. But they definitely got the lead. And I have always made the case that the communists have been infiltrating us for a long time as well. I mean, going way back. There was a book that I often talk about called The Age of Treason by R. Swinburne Clymer, where he was talking about these communist plots to use chemicals, like adding fluoride in the water and all of these other things, that they were communist plans. And they were infiltrating the American system heavily. They had infiltrated the Rockefeller Institute. They had infiltrated all of the public health agencies. And now it's like they've infiltrated us to such a vast degree that they've got MP Chumakov's son running vaccine safety and review at the FDA. And if people take a look at what's in my book in relation to MP Chumakov, they would be, I mean, my aunt was just beside herself. She could not believe that. She couldn't believe that that we had a guy like that running at the FDA. And like I say, I make no claims about him, but that kind of position is just, that's too much of a sensitive position to put somebody like that. His brother, Peter Chumakov, is one of Putin's top advisors for biodefense. So it's crazy. That's his brother. But
Putin and Biden are employing a pair of brothers in the field of biowarfare, and
yeah,
we're supposed to believe that, and we're supposed to believe that they're enemies.
Yeah, and they're the son of they're the son of Stalin's number one bioweaponeer, MP Chumakov.
There's so much more in the book. We haven't even started on Eric Traub, and he's the central character. So you're going to have to come back, if you will, please, Adam. And I will be reading the rest of the book as permits on my show. We're in the middle of chapter 6 right now, and that's an introduction to Eric Traub's work and how he started to make his bioweapons. The things we talk about tonight are very, very serious. I really do look forward to seeing. I know you've said that you're kind of preparing for the storm. You know, there's going to be some kickback about this book, and it is. I agree with you. It is going to come, but little details that you can fact check, folks. There's tons of footnotes here. I'll just take a second because one of my longtime subscribers, Win Tai, has checked in and says, Unit 731 flew directly to Okinawa and surrendered to the Americans, according to the book by Colonel Prouty. And he's talking about a book called The Secret Team by Colonel Fletcher Prouty, which is one of my core books that helped me learn about my dad's career. So anyway, there's a issue of fact.
I probably should have clarified is that
Okay.
they got a lot of the Unit 731s. They got a fraction, and then the Americans got the other half.
Okay.
So there's a document that I can send to you if you want, where it's a CIA declassified file showing the Soviet Union taking a bunch of these Unit 731 guys, and they often bragged about having. They often bragged saying the Soviets said our Germans are better than your Germans to the U.S. president, and I think the same may have been true with this kind of situation. I think so. We definitely got some Unit 731 people, right? But there were several programs they had going on, and I just know that the Soviet Union had got a considerable number of them.
Okay. And that's just typical of the kind of fact checking that you've done.
Yeah, and sometimes I have to clarify things like in videos, because sometimes I just say, well, maybe I should clarify this or this or this. And so I've been doing that as well.
Well, The Sleeper Agent, you can get your copy at Amazon. Recommend you get it. I'm going to mention some names here. I want to hear some reactions from people like J.J. Couey, Mark Kulak, Kevin McKernan, Charles Rixey, any of the real prominent ones like Dr. McCulloch, Dr. Malone, the ones that are out talking, making millions of dollars on a talk circuit. I want to see what they say about this book, because I think this book trumps every single thing they've got.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I believe in my work. I worked very hard at this, and I just had a knack for this kind of work. And once you understand Eric Traub's work, once you understand his science very well, it opens so many other doors, and it also opens doors to like espionage. Like, he worked for several superpowers. He was like the centerpiece of this entire war. So yes, it's got so much information that it really takes a while to kind of digest it, and some people may have to read it a few times. And it is also the kind of book that you can flip through and just kind of read around. That's always, you could do that too, but the book definitely has an incredible wealth of new information that's not really on the scene.
And I can absolutely verify that. So, folks, get a copy of The Sleeper Agent by AW Finnegan. Talk about it with your friends, and talk about it with doctors and physicians and people who are biologists and people who are virologists, and especially people who are in the profession of trying to cure these diseases. Because in order to understand, what they're dealing with, if they know where it comes from, I think it's half the battle. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to close the show without saying this. This stuff sounds awful. It sounds like they're going to give everybody the deadly diseases and cancer and all that stuff. But we fight back with our immune systems. Our immune systems can be rehabilitated. Our immune systems are still alive, and if we do the right thing for our immune system, it will help us. I believe that in my own case, and I think that proper nutrition, if only our doctors and teachers and parents and people around the world would just study nutrition. Nutrition is the key to your immune system, and that's where I think the hope is that we can educate people, not so much as to how horrible the past is, as to how good the future is if we clean up our act.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's exactly what I said in the epilogue. Is that 3-letter word, try, and definitely nutrition, all that stuff. And I've had some good results with fasting too. I'm the kind of person that I like fasting. That's one of the things that I like to get into. And there's all sorts of ways, but I think it's going to be some of these more basic things that help us the most, rather than these hardcore treatments that may make us even worse, you know? So I have kind of gone back to like things like nutrition and getting out every day and just trying to live the best, most balanced lifestyle. And I found my health has been so much better.
All right. Well, let's leave it there with a very hopeful note of guys, just try, keep on trying, and let's be positive, because as bad as the past is, the future is spotless.
Yep.
Good night, everybody.